the Getting Dense with Spence podcast, episode 1. This is the theme song. I made it myself. And I'll talk to you when it's over. It's short, don't worry. There it was. That was the theme song. And this is, like I said before, the Getting Dense with Spence podcast. First episode. I've done others, but they probably won't see the light of day. This one is special compared to those. Those were trial runs. This is not a trial run. This is not a test. I decided that this one would not be a test because I came across a story today on Reddit, on the Seattle, Washington subreddit, that was so interesting and brought me down such a wormhole and has just so many implications for just the way our society runs and the way that we think about civil liberties and law enforcement and hate groups and all of that. Like, there's so much cultural kind of buttons that get pressed throughout it. Like I said, there's neo-Nazis, there's incels, there's murder and intrigue and all kinds of stuff. Possible government abuses of power. So without being any more of a tease than I've already been, I'd like to get started. So I'm gonna read through the story that started all of this, and then kind of go through all of the terms and things that you might not recognize on my first pass through the story. And then I'm going to kind of touch on the things that happen to be connected to the story in some way, and kind of just like bring you through the whole rabbit hole that I went down. So without further ado, I'll start with just reading you the story that I read. And this is, was linked to that subreddit from the King 5 website. And it has to do with a man named Caleb Cole, who had his guns taken away to preemptively prevent a possible attack. So here it goes. Police seize guns from avowed neo-Nazi in Snohomish County. According to court documents, Caleb Cole is the leader of a small but dangerous white supremacist group called Atomwaffen. Police seized military-style firearms from an avowed neo-Nazi in Snohomish County in what is believed to be a first-of-its-kind case in Washington state. Quote, "We actually, I firmly believe, prevented a massacre," said Seattle City Attorney Pete Holmes, whose office was involved in the investigation. Records filed in King County Court show officers from the Arlington and Seattle Police Departments seized 5 military-style rifles, 3 pistols, and other gun parts from a residence on Jordan Trails Road in Arlington. Authorities claim Cole had been amassing firearms and training with weapons in Western Washington. Online videos show Atomwaffen members firing guns and moving through rooms at Devil's Tower, a graffiti-scarred building at an abandoned cement plant near the city of Concrete. That whole thing is so perfect. Like, a neo-Nazi group called Atomwaffen shooting in a building called Devil's Tower in a city called Concrete. It's just too perfect. Anyway, King County prosecutor Dan Satterberg, whose deputy prosecutor Kim Wyatt argued the ERPO case before the judge, said the order to surrender guns is the right tool when law enforcement does not have enough evidence to file a criminal charge. I'm going to get into what an ERPO is, and it's kind of one of the important things about this whole case. But I just want you to kind of remember that sentence. The order to surrender guns is the right tool when law enforcement does not have enough evidence to file a criminal charge. And it might, at points in this, come across as if I'm, a real big Second Amendment guy, or that I don't understand how serious this neo-Nazi group is. And that's not really what this is about. This is about a power that is being granted by this ERPO thing that, I'm not really sure how I feel about that power. And I kind of just want to explore the case for and against that power and just let people know that this is a thing that's going on and that it's a thing that we ought to be educated on. So, I guess a good place to start is with this Caleb Cole character himself. He was really involved with this group. He was the suspected leader, according to the King Five, of the Atomwaffen division in Washington State. He is not charged with a crime, but is named in an ERPO filed earlier this year. And an ERPO stands for an Extreme Risk Protection Order. I don't know if I've said that already, but it's important to know what it means. Filed earlier this month in King County Court. In the civil paperwork, prosecutors and the FBI convinced the judge that Caleb Cole poses a serious threat to public safety by having access and possession to firearms and a concealed pistol license. The judge issued an order requiring Cole to surrender all firearms to the police. Atomwaffen, which is a German word for atomic weapon, is a small but extreme organization that seeks inspiration from Adolf Hitler and Charles Manson. And Charles Manson, a lot of people just know him as a crazy guy or a cult leader, or they know about the Sharon Tate murders, but he ordered those murders in an attempt to trigger a race war. And it says that in this article, which the King 5 article itself is really interesting because of the fact that it contains actually a video montage from the Atomwaffen, where these guys are they're just out shooting these AR-15s. I don't even know if they're AR-15s, but I mean they look like they're military looking rifles, and they've got like these that like nuclear sign, that thing where it's like 3 slices of pizza like all connecting. They've got like a patch on these like camo jackets and stuff that they're wearing that has that insignia on it. And then they're just like running around doing drills. They're wearing like these skull design like bandanas, and like they're doing their best to look like paramilitary and real like legit. But anyway, I guess I should get into what an ERPO actually is, and we can just start there as a as the place that this really becomes, something a little bit more interesting than just a scary hate group, which should be interesting enough as it is. I mean, what do you people want? But okay, so an extreme risk protection order directs a person to surrender their firearms. It would be illegal to purchase or have control of firearms. It restrains the person from obtaining a concealed pistol license and orders them to surrender a license if they already have one. And this is all coming from the Seattle.gov website. And it says, who is it filed against? A person who poses a significant danger of causing personal injury to self or others in the near future by having firearms. Factors that demonstrate such a risk can include violent behavior, threats of self-harm, dangerous mental health crisis, and abuse of drugs or alcohol. The person who is alleged to be dangerous is called the respondent. And then it says, who can request the order? A family or household member or a law enforcement officer or agency may ask the court to issue an order by filing a petition. The person requesting the order is referred to as the petitioner. The law defines a family or household member as a person related by blood, marriage, or adoption to the respondent, someone dating the respondent, a person who has a child in common with the respondent, regardless of whether such person has been married to the respondent or has lived together with the respondent at any time, a person who resides or has resided with the respondent within the past year, a domestic partner of the respondent, a person who has a biological or legal parent-child relationship with the respondent, including step-parents and stepchildren and grandparents and grandchildren, or a person who is acting or who has acted as the respondent's legal guardian. If you do not have the necessary relationship or are not comfortable asking the court for an order, you can tell police about the situation and they can assist in the process. So really, anybody who knows you can request an extreme risk protection order if they think that you are unstable enough to need your guns taken away. And it's just a hunch of mine, but I would hazard a guess that anytime the police are told that somebody is an extreme risk and, they would like protection by the seizing of that person's firearms by law enforcement, I'm going to guess that the law enforcement almost 100% of the time acts on that request. But that is just speculation. So yeah, that's what an ERPO is, and that's what was used against Caleb Cole. And again, he was a member of this Atomwaffen neo-Nazi group. So we're going to get into actually who they are and what they're about really quick. So this is coming from the ADL website, which is the group that fights anti-Semitism. And they have a whole page on the Atomwaffen division. So they've got the insignia up there, and then they have this kind of key points, bullet points thing, and then it's a long article that I won't read to you. But I'll go through the key points. So this is what the AWD, or Atomwaffen Division, is all about. It is a small neo-Nazi group whose members are preparing for a race war to combat what they consider the cultural and racial displacement of the white race. The AWD spreads their hateful propaganda via the internet and by distributing provocative flyers, posters, and stickers. Members participate in hate camps, and this hate camps is what I was talking about when they were, running around in that Devil's Tower and running around the woods and shaking their fists at the camera and acting like anime villains. Members participate in hate camps, organized hiking excursions, and military-style training exercises. Members have participated in white supremacist rallies and events organized by other white supremacist groups. And then finally, members and associates have been linked to violent crimes, including murder and alleged plots to attack civilians, nuclear facilities, and synagogues. They are a small neo-Nazi group that became active in 2016. The group is believed to have originated online from a now defunct neo-Nazi forum called Iron March, which was known for its extreme content and calls for violence. All right, so the rest of it is all about how they, think that the Jews run all the banks and they want to displace their white race and they have a goal of uncompromising victory. They say things like gas the kikes and race war now. Like, they're real, like, reasonable kind of center-right activist. So anyway, I actually wanted to talk about those crimes that they were talking about. So they say in that that there's some alleged stuff about attacking civilians, nuclear facilities, and synagogues. But I'm going to just focus on what they actually have done, the violent crimes, including murder. So there's really, there's three guys, Caleb Cole not being one of them. And Caleb Cole, again, is the guy who had the ERPO used to take his guns. He wasn't accused of any crime. So these are the guys that did commit crimes that I think that the police are kind of saying are the that there's a pattern of violence in this group and hate crimes in this group, and that anybody in this group who's amassing a bunch of weapons, like an ERPO, is probably a good idea. Like, let's get those guns away from that guy. So, sorry, a little sip of wine there. The first one is the most recent one, and to me, the most cut and dry case of a hate crime of these three guys. So the man, Samuel Woodward, this is, the source is ProPublica, by the way. If you look up Samuel Woodward, ProPublica, I'm sure he'll pop up. So the man, Samuel Woodward, has been charged in Orange County, California, with murdering Blaze Bernstein, who went missing in early January while visiting his family over winter break. Prosecutors allege that Woodward stabbed Bernstein more than 20 times before burying his body in an Orange County park, where it was eventually discovered. The two men had attended high school together. So, I read a little bit more about this, and according to Woodward, they were at the park together. I don't know if they met there or, they ran into each other, or like what their relationship was before this, but Samuel Woodward accused Blaze Bernstein of trying to kiss him, and for that crime he was stabbed more than 20 times and had his body buried in Orange County Park. So that to me is pretty cut and dry. You killed... that's the other thing. So Blaze Bernstein is an openly gay Jewish man. Woodward killed him for trying to kiss him. I don't think that it is just coincidence that his last name is Bernstein. Like, I don't think it's coincidence that he killed not just a gay man, but a Jewish one. Like, this is, to me, an obvious, unambiguous hate crime. And his, Samuel Woodward's involvement in the Atomwaffen group, whether or not it's directly related to this hate crime, he's a member of the group who commits hate crimes, and it's a hate group. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that, that Atomwaffen as a group encourages this kind of shit, and that being part of it is a good indicator that you might be capable of this kind of violence. So, you wouldn't say, because if he belonged to a different club, if he was like also in the chess club, like that probably has nothing to do with the fact that he killed an openly gay Jewish man in cold blood. The fact that he was part of a neo-Nazi group probably has something to do with why he did that, if you catch my drift. Anyway, here's the other two. So the next one is a little bit, it seems more personal to me. I don't know if it's exactly a hate crime. It does seem like the fact that he was part of Atomwaffen didn't do him any favors, but I don't know if you can directly blame them the way you can kind of point the finger at them in the Samuel Woodward case. So here it is. In Reston, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C., police say a couple was fatally shot in December by their daughter's 17-year-old boyfriend. The shooting took place after the couple told their daughter to break up with the boy when they learned of his neo-Nazi beliefs, reportedly linked to Atomwaffen. The accused, who is not being named because he is a minor, shot himself in the head but survived. According to Hankey's, he appears to mostly be a sympathizer with Atomwaffen, though at least one report said he was in direct contact with the group. So, in this case, like, I don't know what being a sympathizer with a group that's only got 100 members even means. It's like, I don't even know how you would be a sympathizer without being in direct contact. It says one report says he was, so it seems like he was in some kind of contact, but he's not hardcore. Like the Caleb Cole guy who was like, supposedly the leader of the Washington chapter or whatever. Like this guy, he could have liked a Facebook post of theirs or some shit. Like I don't know if he really even has anything to do with the group. But it's hard to tell because it is such a small group. Like you're kind of in or you're not. But anyway, that one, he killed the parents of the girl that, broke up with him because the parents told her to. So, to me, that's like a crime of passion. And then the still stranger, we have Devin Arthurs, a 19-year-old who was charged with killing his two roommates. He told police he was an Atomwaffen member and, bizarrely, also a convert to fundamentalist Islam. He has pleaded not guilty, but during police interrogation, he claimed he acted to prevent attacks that Atomwaffen members were plotting and because his roommates were taunting him for his religious conversion. Now, that's weird, right? He claimed he acted to prevent attacks that Atomwaffen members were plotting, and he was a member but also a convert to fundamentalist Islam, and his... Okay, so I'll keep going because that's weird. But then here's this. This is what he says in the interrogation. In hindsight, it's very stupid what I've done, and honestly, all of this feels very surreal, like a dream. He told police in a videotaped interrogation that was recently released. Another roommate, Brandon Russell, 22, was considered a leader of Atomwaffen. In a separate case, he was sentenced in January to 5 years for possessing explosives. So that's kind of enough right there. Just even that Brandon Russell guy possessing explosives, like what the fuck does a leader of a neo-Nazi group do with explosives except terrorism, right? But the Devin Arthurs guy, the guy who murdered his roommates, it sounds like he didn't do it in the name of Atomwaffen. And in fact, his defense, whether you buy it or not, is that he was trying to prevent those attacks. But he gets lumped in these, in the, what is it, ADL? Or, yeah, the ADL's kind of definition of the Atomwaffen group when they cite those murders, they're including him in there. So it's, that's odd. But regardless of all of that, the Atomwaffen division is obviously fits the bill of domestic terrorism. Like whatever definition you fancy, they are definitely not outside of that definition. So the reason why this is interesting is it's not just about the fact that, you know, in Washington State, you know, our liberal paradise, that we have this really strange apocalyptic neo-Nazi group. What's strange is that they took this guy's guns, which, you know, some of you are probably like, well, duh, but it's the tool, the government tool that they used, the order that they used to get those guns, that makes this interesting, because it's kind of a gray area, because everything that I've told you about Atomwaffen and Caleb Cole, and you know, these guys who were a part of the division that murdered people, you know, and they say things like join your local Nazis and race war now, and you know, they're, you know, the Anti-Defamation League, that Jewish group that I was talking about, or the anti-Semitic group that I was talking about, says that, you know, the views they articulate are white supremacy on steroids. You know, what's the change they want to see? Real world violence, real world apocalyptic violence. And that's all quoted from NPR. So yeah, like, these guys are bad fucking news, and getting guns out of their hands seems like it would be a cut and dry, black and white, pardon the pun, like, good thing. But this ERPO thing does give me pause, because let me kind of talk about ERPOs a little bit more. So I described them before. It's a extreme risk protection order that prevents individuals at high risk of harming themselves or others from accessing firearms by allowing family, household members, and police to obtain a court order when there is demonstrated evidence that that person poses a significant danger. And you might think, okay, big deal, whoop-de-doo, probably a good thing. Crazy people get guns out of their hands. But let me read you a story from CBS News. Actually, let me start with one from Seattle Times. We'll build our way up to it. So this is one from Seattle Times. Days before the nationwide opening of the movie Joker, Redmond police seized assault-style rifles and handguns from a 23-year-old Redmond man who allegedly posted a disturbing social media message and photo referencing the film, according to police and court records. According to the petition for an ERPO filed in King County Superior Court last week, the Seattle Police Department's Criminal Intelligence Unit came across the man's social media posts during an unrelated investigation Tuesday and forwarded information to Redmond police detectives. In one photo, the man was holding two AK-47 type firearms, one in each hand, pointed toward the ceiling, the petition says. His index finger is on the trigger on both his right and left hand. The man captioned the photo, "One ticket for Joker, please," and posted it September 26th, the petition says. Police viewed it as an implied threat of a possible mass shooting. The petition goes on to explain that the U.S. Army and FBI have issued warnings of potential mass shootings at screenings of the film based on social media posts by people who call themselves incels, a shortened term popularized in internet forums for involuntary celibate. The Redmond man refers to himself as an incel, the petition says. And so that's all true. And actually, of course it's true. Why would I read Seattle Times? You know, duh. Anyway, that's all well and good. Later on in the article, there were other things that are actually even more damning of this guy than what I just described. Stuff about, I would shoot any woman at any time, and then another thing saying, I just want to like beat the shit out of a woman. It was like really dumb, but like also really violent and kind of disturbing. They're not kind of, but extremely disturbing. But if you notice, he was going to the opening of the movie Joker, and he got his guns taken away, and he said that the one ticket for Joker please post with the guns was like a dark joke. Not funny, obviously, like, especially for a guy who is an incel, considering all the violence that incels have been perpetrating in the last few years. And then also not funny because of the terrorist attack that happened in Aurora during the Dark Knight. So he's kind of doubling, tripling down on, like, you seem like you're actually going to fucking kill everybody. So once again, get why they filed it. But another thing that I'd have you notice is that this Caleb Cole situation and this Joker situation are like hot on the heels of each other. Like, they are doing this more often. And for the Redmond guy, he was being watched by the police for something else. He got on their radar while they were looking for something else. So it's like they are scrolling through social media looking for sketchy people to take the guns away from. And I know that sounds like whatever, like I am wearing a tinfoil hat right now, but it's going to get worse. The tinfoil hat's not coming off. It's just getting put on. I'm actually going to take you to what I think is the most, and this one didn't happen in Washington, but the most egregious use of these ERPOs, and why this was the story that really, obviously being prone to paranoia, the second I heard that phrase, being ordered to surrender guns is the right tool when law enforcement does not have enough evidence to file a criminal charge, seems like that. Like that's what perked my ears up, because that seems incredibly, like, they're not even pretending to not be doing exactly what all of these, like, right-wing people have been accusing them of wanting to do, which is take their guns. Like, for the longest time, people on what I would consider to be, like, my side of politics have been promising these right-wing gun nuts that nobody wants to take your guns. Nobody's saying that. And then it's like the prosecutor before the judge said the order to surrender guns is the right tool when law enforcement does not have enough evidence to file a criminal charge. So even though in that Caleb Cole story it seems perfectly justified, that sentence right there creeps me out. So anyway, let me read the one that's really a problem. So this CBS News. Two police officers ordered to remove firearms from a house on a red flag protective order, which is the same thing. It's the general term for the type of legislation that an ERPO falls under. So let me restart. Two police officers ordered to remove firearms from a house on a red flag protective order fatally shot an armed man Monday morning in Ferndale, Maryland, police said. Anne Arundel County Police arrived at the house at 5:17 a.m. to remove guns from the home under a new law that temporarily allows for the seizure of firearms if a person shows quote-unquote red flags, that they are a danger to themselves or others, CBS Baltimore reports. A man, later identified by police as 61-year-old Gary Willis, answered his door with a gun in his hand. Anne Arundel County Police Sergeant Jacqueline Davis told CBS News. Sergeant Davis said the man put the gun down, but then, according to a police press release, Willis became irate when officers attempted to serve the order. Willis picked the gun up again, and a fight ensued over the gun. A shot was fired, and though the first shot didn't strike anyone, the officers then fatally shot the man. Willis said her uncle, quote, likes to speak his mind, unquote, but wouldn't hurt anybody. I'm just dumbfounded right now. They didn't need to do what they did. That's the actual real end quote. I said that too soon. Sorry. So that one, that one kind of fucks me up because this is a guy who hadn't committed a crime, who had the police come and try and seize his property that he should, the Second Amendment still should protect him from having them seize. And yeah, like he was obviously like not cooperating, but like there's a part of me that goes, yeah, well, fuck them. What the fuck are they doing at his house demanding he hands over his guns when he didn't do anything fucking wrong or anything illegal that they could press charges on? It's innocent until proven guilty, which is actually funny because I found a thing where the former CIA director. I'll probably try and rip it from YouTube and maybe like include it in this episode in the end or the beginning or something. But the former CIA director says, "You are innocent until you are alleged to be involved in criminal activity," which is the most like bald, naked fucking bullshit. But it's actually not bullshit because that's the way things really work. Like the real bullshit is that you're innocent until proven guilty. Like what he's saying is much closer to the reality, especially with stuff like this coming down the pipeline. This red flag legislation, ERPO, and blah blah blah. Like you are innocent until alleged to be involved in criminal activity, and in this case, not even until you are alleged to be involved in criminal activity, until you are alleged to be potentially involved someday in violent behavior, which is way different. And we get that twisted at our own peril, but whatever. So let me go back to my notes. Sorry, I haven't done this with notes before. I usually kind of just riff. And I hope that you guys are kind of following the thread here as far as, I'm really trying to explore what seems to be, to me, and my political sensibilities and all of that, like a total gray area. This is something that there isn't an easy answer to because it is very possible that there have been massacres that have been avoided or that there will be massacres that will be avoided as a result of this kind of thing. And a lot of what right-wingers will tell you as far as their Second Amendment stuff is we want there to be not very much gun control or no gun control because all gun control does is ends up affecting us responsible gun owners and the people who are the real criminals and the real violent terrorists and all that. They get the guns anyway. And now I'm just gunless because I follow the fucking laws. But this type of legislation seems to be, you could make the argument that this is a possible solution where it's like, yeah, you can have your guns as long as you're not running around in abandoned buildings screaming race war now and, affiliating with groups that, murder people in cold blood. So, I don't know. That's why it's interesting. It's truly got me stumped. It's kind of, on one hand, I have that Ben Franklin quote bouncing around in my head about, he who will trade freedom for security deserves neither, or something like that. And that's something I tend to believe. And then on the other hand, I go, this is a preventative measure, and if it's coming from the families and friends of these dangerous people, these people who have red flags, like that does seem to be something that should be addressed. On the other hand, though, it's not just family and friends. Because, like I explained before, there's that little caveat where it's like, even if you aren't family, and it's not really friends, it's like direct. The way it's written is so funny because it tries to imply that it's only going to be people who are really, spouses, children, parents, siblings. Like, those are the people that are allowed to, people who are living with you. Those are the people who are allowed to kind of request one of these things. But in reality, once law enforcement is included in that, as somebody who can start the filing process, you've now expanded it to like thousands of people that you don't even know that can get one of these things, that can hit you with one of these things. And obviously, like, law enforcement, in a perfect world, would only do that if they had reasonable cause or whatever. But that's just not the case. And then the other problem is, of course, the whole caveat where you can tell the police, which makes total sense, because once you involve the police, then it's as easy as this. I barely know this fucking guy, but he gives me the heebie-jeebies, or I just don't like his politics or whatever, and he's Mr. Gun Nut, and he's talking about one day we might have to overthrow a totalitarian regime that takes over the United States or whatever. He's an Alex Jones listener or something like that. But yeah, he's pretty much a harmless guy, but you don't fucking like him or you think he's fucking nuts. You can just go to the police and now they can take his shit because you told them that you have the heebie-jeebies, and then they can find one kind of fucking gross Facebook post or something that he made 5 years ago, and now his Second Amendment rights are being violated. Obviously a hypothetical, not necessarily something that's happened yet, but don't forget the guy that was fucking killed, who I couldn't find anything that talked about why he even had one of those put out against him. And if you can guarantee that if there was something that was publicly available, it would have been in that article, because for all these other guys, every stupid fucking thing that they said on the internet is included in the write-ups about what they did. All right, so let's move on. One of the things I also wanted to talk about, I found it in item 4 of table 5 in the Countering Violent Extremism report to congressional requesters issued by the United States Government Accountability Office, which I feel very cool saying. And it was like a PDF of this fucking report that I read through. And and this is just a note. Like, this isn't really about the main thrust of what we were talking about. This is just a note. But this was part of their strategy to counter violent extremism, part of the Department of Homeland Security's strategy. Brokering connections between private sectors, civil society, and communities interested in countering violent extremist narratives. The DHS noted initial progress with YouTube and the LAPD sponsorship of a university challenge where students develop campaigns against violent extremism. Now, anytime I hear the LAPD, an eyebrow cocks up, because I just don't trust those motherfuckers as far as I can throw them. But I also, if they're just, it sounds like they just used some of their money to get some university kids to like think of how to fight violent extremism. So that seems pretty, it's about as on the up and up as the LAPD ever fucking gets. But the thing that stuck out to me was that the DHS noted initial progress with YouTube in regards to, brokering connections between private sectors, blah, 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 all the things I read before. But the DHS talking to YouTube about how to counter violent extremism and noting initial progress. Like, I wonder what that progress was. Like, were they talking about refining their algorithms to have those algorithms steer people away from certain content or towards certain content? Like, that does seem like, a little bit of meddling in places that maybe they ought not meddle. I don't know. The government noting initial progress with YouTube. Like, was it something as simple as, running some ads, some kind of de-radicalization ads, or was it, like I said, something a little bit more deep in the algorithms and stuff? I don't know. Anyway, let's get back to ERPOs, the Atomwaffen, and what all of this kind of means for other groups, right? Because neo-Nazis are about as unsympathetic as a group gets, followed closely by radical Islamist domestic terrorism. And in that same report that I just read from, they had a kind of breakdown of all the domestic terrorism that has taken place since September 12th, 2001. And why they picked that date specifically, I'll never know. But white supremacist gangs and domestic terrorists and Islamic radical fundamentalist terrorists or whatever, like both of those factions have pretty much committed an equivalent amount of domestic terrorism, which actually makes it interesting that one guy belonged to both groups. Maybe that was the bridge between the ideologies. I don't know. Anyway, that reminds me of in the movie and in the book Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon, there's a moment where this Black Panther is talking about getting along when he was locked up. He was getting along with this neo-Nazi, and the main character Doc says, "You're a Black Panther and you were hanging out with neo-Nazis?" And he goes, I came to find that we shared some similar opinions about the U.S. government. And then he kind of just leaves it at that, but I've always thought that was funny. Like, maybe it's something as simple as that. Who knows? But anyway, Washington State. Oh yeah, so in this report where they were talking about kind of how equivalent those two groups' responsibility for domestic terrorism has been, I came across basically just a list of every domestic terrorist event that's happened since September 12th, 2001. And I was able to see like the location and the date that they happened. And it turns out that in Washington State, in Tacoma, on March 23rd, 2003, a white supremacist gang murdered a homeless man as a part of a gang initiation. And that was the last domestic terrorist event that we had in this state. But that Oregon, and then we also had one that we're one of the few states that's had both an Islamic fundamentalist thing and a white supremacist thing. I can't remember the Islamic fundamentalist one off the top of my head, though. But then in Roseburg, Oregon, 2015, there was a white supremacist that shot and killed 9 at his community college. And actually, Oregon seems to be, like a standard deviation or two higher than most other states as far as having white supremacist activity, domestic terroristic activity happen in their state, which I thought was interesting. But Also, that's not too far from Washington, so the idea that this kind of stuff is a big deal here is not just lefty alarmism or something like that. It's a real thing. Um, but I wanted to talk about the Patriot Act for a second, because this seems to me a very similar thing, where under the I don't know, I'm not even going to try and say that word right now. I had too much to drink, but under the guise of trying to make the country safer, law enforcement has its powers expanded, and its ability to surveil people expanded. And I think that, that is something to watch, no matter how much you fucking hate Nazis, because everybody fucking with a brain hates Nazis, and no matter how much you would like to see some common sense gun control, because everybody would like to see some common sense gun control, things like this get abused. And that's my my take, that is not as much like, oh, like I'm gonna sit on the fence here and this is a gray area. Like, this thing will be abused. It's about whether you think that that's worth it. Does that make sense? Like, it's not about if, it's about when. And not only that, but there will be more cases like that old man who was killed in Virginia. So when you're trying to figure out where you fall as far as your opinion about this kind of stuff and the way you talk about it, like, keep that in mind. I also wanted to talk a bit about what domestic terrorism is and how it's defined. And I'm going to bring up an article by The Independent, or from The Independent, by Lucy Pasha Robinson. But it actually doesn't matter too much, because here's the thing. The headline kind of says it all. Antifa, U.S. security agencies label group domestic terrorists. U.S. security officials have classified the left-wing group Antifa as domestic terrorists, confidential documents have revealed. The Department of Homeland Security has reportedly been warning about the growing threat of violence between left-wing anarchists and right-wing nationalists since 2016, amid claims Antifa's activity has become more confrontational, according to documents seen by Politico. A confidential intelligence report by the DHS and the FBI accused the anarchist extremists of attacks on police, government, and political institutions, along with any other symbols of the capitalist system or displays of racism, social injustice, or fascism. It describes some of their activities as domestic terrorist violence. So there you go. This is not just about neo-Nazis. This is not just about right-wingers and crazy fucks and people who are like suicidally depressed, like, and it's not just about, radical Islamic terrorists. Like, it doesn't matter kind of where you're coming from politically. Like, they are going to keep expanding this definition of what a domestic terrorist is, and they use a purposefully vague definition, so that any power that gets granted to them being law enforcement, by the way, and just the government, any power that gets granted to them, as with regards to surveillance and their ability to seize property and all of that, like, anything that you do towards that, under the umbrella of domestic terrorism, they will abuse. And that's not to say that there's not some Antifa people who, you can make an argument that they are domestic terrorists or whatever. But like, I think that you start getting more and more dangerously close to domestic terrorists being considered people who are participating in political dissent. And this brings us to kind of the final thing that I have to read you, the final thing I want to talk about, which is an article from The Guardian which talks about the program COINTELPRO. And it does a pretty good job of summing up what that program does. It starts here. One of the major governmental abuses denounced by the 1976 final report of the Church Committee was the FBI's domestic counterintelligence programs, or COINTELPRO. Under that program, the FBI targeted political groups and individuals it deemed subversive and dangerous, including civil rights activists such as the NAACP and Martin Luther King, black nationalist movements, socialist and communist organizations, anti-war protesters, and various right-wing groups, and infiltrated them with agents who, among other things, attempted to manipulate members into agreeing to commit criminal acts so that the FBI could arrest and prosecute them. This program was exposed only because a left-wing group, the so-called, and this is great, Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI, broke into an FBI office in Pennsylvania, stole the files relating to the program, and sent them to various newspapers. So, this is a perfect example of why we need to tread carefully when it comes to this type of thing. Because the government, when they get scared or when their feet are like, because the political situation that was going on during the COINTELPRO years, and I'm sure also that program under different names and in different capacities continues to exist, and tinfoil hat coming off again now, but I'm sure that's true. But regardless, if you look at the political situation in the 60s, there was just more going on, even though it feels like there's a fuck ton going on right now. Like, it was just such it was like culturally so much was going on, politically, economically, like militarily, like there was just everything was happening. So the idea that they were maybe a little bit more gung-ho with all of that stuff then as opposed to now, like, okay, I can see that maybe, but I would not retire your paranoia just yet, because the only reason we even know that they did that is that one of the types of groups that they were trying to infiltrate and destroy from within and implicate and encourage to do criminal activity, that group is the reason why we know what we know about what they were up to. That group is the reason why we have the information that we as a public have a right to know what they were trying to do to us as we were trying to improve our democracy. Like, and that's the thing that you have to keep in mind, is that they don't just come for one group for one reason. You give them these powers, and they're general powers, and they can use them at any time. And if COINTELPRO in the 60s and early 70s had access to the type of surveillance tools that the NSA has, and the freedom to surveil that the Patriot Act provides, and the ability to disarm and whatever that these red flag legislative measures allow them, who knows what they could have gotten away with, and who knows what they're going to be able to get away with as a result of those things. And I guess I should probably leave it there. I know that this was really uh, information heavy, kind of dense, dark stuff, a little complicated, and I jumped around a lot. But I hope that you got something out of it, and go ahead, and if you made it this far and you listened all the way through, let me know what I should talk about next time. If you've got a good idea, let me know if I said something that I really shouldn't have said and that I should delete this from the internet before, I am implicated in a plot, or I am, um, unemployable because I said some, horrible thing that, under the view of, 5 years from now, will be extremely regrettable in all likelihood. If you have that kind of foresight, go ahead and let me know so I can erase any record of this from ever having existed. Um, no, but in all seriousness, thank you, and I hope you'll join me on the next one.